Welcome to the Celebrate Arkansas podcast. I'm Jocelyn Murphy, the managing editor. Today we're here with Alexa Williams, our director of growth and development, and Caitie Holt, a curator at the Museum of Native American History in Bentonville. Hi, Caitie.
Hi, nice to see you guys.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate you coming to speak with us, and we're really excited to. MONAH is an organization that I've known about in the community for a bit, and I used to do some work when I worked at the paper. We would do some work with you guys, but I personally still don't know a ton about it, so I'm really glad to have you here today, and also to coincide with National Native American Heritage Month in November, so it's very timely.
Yes, it is. It's a great way to spread the news and celebrate the month.
Yeah. So how long have you been with MONAH?
I have been with MONAH almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in June.
Okay. And what did you know about the museum before joining? Was it something that you were familiar with, passionate about? How did you get started with MONAH?
Yeah, so I had visited before in high school with my grandparents. And that was my first introduction to the museum. And I kind of always knew it was around. But I spent a couple of years in college going to NSU in Oklahoma, which is the Cherokee Nation capital. And since I have Cherokee heritage, it was important to me to find something in Arkansas that continued the Indigenous hospitality. And so I was like, well, I might as well check out MONAH, and so I started as an intern there and then kind of worked my way up. Yeah.
So were you working on, in your internship, was it like a curatorial internship? Were you working on curation?
Not at the time. I was actually working on our outreach services, so connecting with the community, helping with events, planning, all sorts of get-togethers and story times.
Okay, but now you're a curator.
Yes, now I'm a
curator.
So
what are your roles? I'm sure there are many, but what are some of your main responsibilities now at the museum?
Yeah, some of my main responsibilities as a curator are taking care of the collection, working on artifacts that need repairs. I also spend a lot of time archiving our system, keeping track of what we have, what new comes in, and making sure everything is where it should be. And then I also do interpretation as well.
Okay.
Do artifacts require a lot of gentle love and care, essentially?
Yes, they do. It is, and it's not just for the monetary aspect. It's also important to honor and respect the cultures that are represented at the museum.
That makes sense. Where are most of these artifacts from?
So we have a lot of artifacts from North America, but we also cover artifacts from South and Central America.
Okay. I'm just curious if any of the collection or any new items that you get in ever are from Arkansas, like itself, are they, or from the region, Oklahoma, like you said, that's where the capital of Cherokee Nation is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do have a lot of local artifacts from Arkansas, from the tribes that were represented and once lived here. So we have a lot of Osage outfits and items from the Osage. The items that we have from the Osage actually were referenced for the Killers of the Flower Moon movie.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So they came in and learned and took notes on the original artifacts and clothing. We also have a lot of pottery, mostly Caddo, and we don't have a lot of Quapaw at the moment, but we do have a few pieces that are Quapaw pottery as well.
Well, and you said as new artifacts come in, when the museum gets something new to you, is that something that's just recently been discovered somewhere, or are you guys constantly working with other organizations to acquire new artifacts and grow your collection. So it
Yeah.
might not necessarily have been just discovered.
Right. Most of the time it is not just discovered
Okay.
as recently. However, we do kind of keep track of what's going on archaeologically in the area and, the rest of the world. Our artifacts typically come through either donations from the community or our founder, David. He has a massive collection. Obviously, it's his private collection, and he opens it up to the public. Whatever isn't from him is donated by other donors that also collect, and occasionally bidding, like
Auctions?
Yes, auctions.
And that's David Bogle is
Yes.
his last name. So he founded the museum in 2006. And he is also a registered member of, well, I say also, you said you have Cherokee history.
Yes.
So he's a registered member of Cherokee Nation and also a Bentonville native. So those are some things that you, there's some overlap as well because you're a Northwest Arkansas native as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have a lot in common. We both have ancestors on the Dawes Roll, which is just history in itself. But so I was intrigued to hear his history and how he got started with the museum. As you mentioned, he opened it in 2006, but the location right now is where we've been since 2008. He quickly realized the collection was growing a little bit too quickly and needed a bigger space.
And that collection, so you said a lot of it is his personal collection. So the museum has more than 10,000 artifacts on display. Do you also have like how much of that is the full collection? How much of it, the collection is not on display at any given time?
That is a great question. And that is one of the many intricacies of what I do as a curator.
Okay.
And that's something we're still kind of getting a grasp of. Over the years, there's either been documentation that has been lost due to emails or lack of file keeping. So that's what I'm currently working on, is figuring out what belongs where, who it belonged to, and just making sure I have everything where it should be in order. But as far as, David's collection versus MONAH's collection, it's pretty easy to tell the difference. So usually David will still purchase things for the museum, but he'll, donate it to the museum, and that's where it's MONAH's property from then on. Other things he loans from his personal collection. So I would say maybe 40-60 would be a good way to split that.
Okay. Yeah. And so tell us a little about the museum itself, the experience of coming to the museum. Do you guys do a lot of events? Do you do temporary exhibitions? Or is it mostly, here's our permanent collection and it's, laid out how it's laid out, but it's mostly the historical component of learning, the history of the various tribes that we have on display? Like, what's the experience of coming to the museum?
Yeah. So I would say, first and foremost, and I'm stealing this from our founder, he says, we're not just a history museum, we're an art museum as well. So there is a lot of factors when you visit. We, of course, have over 10,000 artifacts, but we start from the Paleo period, 24,000 years ago, up until historic times. And so you're getting to see a really broad scope of Indigenous history from North, South, and Central America. We do have our gift shop as well, which carries into our more modern Indigenous artists. So you're not just ending your visit with the historic items, you're seeing what's currently being made. And that's a big part of our museum as well. And we also have story times every last Saturday of the month. This Saturday's is around Thanksgiving. It's going to be the Wamapog story of Thanksgiving. And that's just a great way to, continue sharing history and keeping the community engaged. And then as far as temporary exhibits, we are just starting to do those a lot more. We are actually going to be doing a temporary exhibit of an exhibit we had last year in December, and it is a Navajo rug exhibition. So all of the rugs that we have in the museum are donated by a man named Dr. Howard Cockrell. And so he was a collector, and he donated about 60 rugs to us, which is
Wow.
a great collection. So we have a lot to kind of go through and rotate out. So we'll be rotating those out coming really soon.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to have both the historical roots as well as the ongoing, currently creating Indigenous population, because the story is still being told. It's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing part of modern society as well as historical society. And it sounds like MONAH kind of captures both of those aspects.
Absolutely. So, I mean, one of our main kind of goals is to make sure that we are a welcoming environment for anyone, despite age, ethnicity, race, gender. So when you come to the museum, we are not only just a educational resource, but we are also a opportunity to represent different types of communities, especially Indigenous communities in the area and around the world. One thing that I love sharing is that Native American people are still alive. There's a misconception that we're ancient in the past, and different tribes, of course, are no longer with us over time, but there's still many tribes that are prospering in their own communities. Currently, we have 574 federally recognized tribes in the U.S. alone. That's not including Canada or Central America, which they have around 600 to 800. So it's a great place to just come and see yourself and to be open to learn. If you're not Indigenous, it's also just a great way to learn about the communities that you live in, that you maybe haven't heard about, or that you thought maybe no longer exist. So yeah, it's a great way for us to be that for people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And on this podcast, of course, we're Celebrate Arkansas. And so we like to tell stories about the people that are in the state that have made the state what it is today and that are continuing to shape how Arkansas thrives, how it grows. And so one of the things that I was excited about having you and MONAH on today, especially with November being National Native American Heritage Month, is I know that the Indigenous people and the tribes and the Native Americans that are around our region have greatly shaped how Arkansas is today. They're a part of our history and are still very prevalent in and around the state. And so I thought it would be great to kind of tie in Arkansas's history with how it relates to how Native Americans are living and thriving and growing their businesses and their personal lives here in the state too. And I know that that's something that MONAH, just from my very brief research online, is doing by those things: educational series, getting people involved in some of the fun things, some of the really interesting things that the Native Americans have brought to Arkansas and Arkansas history. And so I found that extremely exciting. One of the things I wanted to ask about in my brief online research was, I think it was called cold calendars.
Maybe our winter counts?
Winter, yes,
thinking
winter
of?
cold.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So there are at least around 100, less than 100 in existence from North America. And so basically it is a count that is one per tribe, depending on if the tribe does that. We have two in our museum, and I'll kind of share more about those. But
Okay.
One of ours is Lone Dog's Winter Count, and that is a pictorial count on a buffalo hide drawn on by one person in the tribe, and they have to keep record of their history of the tribe. And so it goes over 70 years of history. And each year they have to decide together as a tribe what the most significant thing of the year is, which is amazing. Just to think about that they, thought about preserving their own history, and that this winter count, this bison hide, was passed down generation to generation, which is a lot like what Indigenous people are doing today. Like just continually passing down traditions, passing down oral language, making sure that there's ceremonies that stay alive. So that is one of our winter counts. And what's cool about that one is it has a 1 year of a picture drawn by the Lakota people of a meteor shower. So they're actively looking at the sky, learning, how to go places and following the stars, of course. But what's cool is that on our other winter count, that exact same meteor shower is depicted from an entirely different tribe, the Wajaje people. And so those two have connections, even though they're in different parts of the world, different parts of the U.S., of course. So just having that, tangible history passed down and interpreted is amazing.
Yeah, and to see the symmetry of two very different people living in different areas, but also having that commonality and that crossover, which is one of the fun things about history in general, but getting to see it depicted on a piece of art history like that. And that's really neat.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing that, I hope you don't mind my saying that MONAH, I feel like it's a bit more on the intimate side as far as scale. So it's pretty incredible that there are so few of these artifacts in existence that we found, at least. And MONAH has 2 of them, you said?
2 of them, yes, that's correct.
Are there any other, of course, I'm sure everything in the collection is impressive and has its own historical significance. That's why it's in the collection. But just high level, are there any other really interesting pieces like that stand out that you're like, actually, this is a really big deal that we have this?
Yeah. I can name a few. We have some great tools. Some of the first atlatls used to hunt woolly mammoths, which it's just amazing that they've lasted this long. We also have the Sweetwater biface, which is a point or a blade, as you would call it, used for hunting. But it is the thinnest point to date. And nappers all over the world, people that make arrowheads and points, they're trying to recreate it. Yeah. And currently no one has come close to it. That is to say, I don't know about today, but someone's working on replicating it, and we have people all over the world that come to see it. As far as I think my favorite would be, I would say our Navajo sand painting rugs. They share such great history of the Navajo Dene people, and it's not just their history, it's also their lineage, it's their belief system. And so it talks about their deities and their gods through these sand painting rugs, these weavings. I just think that's very interesting.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm trying to imagine myself personally trying to weave anything, and I think it would be a travesty. So,
yeah, I definitely, I look at these artifacts and I just think that is some intricate work. That's just, it's more than just history. It's truly art. And it continues to grow into art from the woodland period onward as they start settling down into the places that they would create villages in.
And the tools that you have at any period in history, essentially, except very recent, except for modern.
Right.
To be able to create, so that's part of what I love about going to, I love art museums and any kind of, there are several kinds of forms that stand out for me because I'm just standing there looking at it and I'm like, how did you make this out of what I know that you had to work with? It's pretty unbelievable.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a little, I get a little awestruck,
Mhm.
even though I see these artifacts and I work with them on a daily basis, because each one of them has their own story, and they not only have their story, they have a person behind it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's really what I try to communicate and share.
If, as a curator, if there was one piece or type of piece that you would love to get your hands on in the museum, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. I would probably have to say some of our beaded items. They're just beautiful. I think any of the moccasins are just fantastic. And those share a story as well. I'm fortunate enough to be as close as I am with these items. So anytime I'm working with them, I like to flip them upside down and look at the soles. It's just so detailed, and you can see the wear and the tear and the callus from the hide getting used over time. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Get to literally hold a piece of history.
Yeah.
Which sounds like it would be a very fun job.
Yes, it is fun for sure.
Were you so you said you went to school in at NSU? Is that what you said?
Yes, I went to NSU for my not undergrad, first 2 years.
Okay.
And then I transferred to John Brown University here in Arkansas.
Okay. I was going to ask if history or curation or art, all of the above, was that something you were always interested in? Did that interest develop a little bit later, like once you're around picking what you want to study? What, was that always an interest that you had?
Yeah. I've always had an interest in art for as long as I can remember. Both of my parents are artists as well. So it kind of was, expanded upon into me. But I graduated from John Brown University with a degree in art and illustration with a fine art emphasis.
Okay.
And so, that was definitely something I was interested in, especially art history. Of course, we studied more of the European and Italian items that are most commonly known. And so when I found out that we have a whole history of Indigenous American art that is not being as represented in these classes, in this atmosphere in college, like that was something that I was like, I want to be connected to that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and that's asking if you were always interested in history. Where I was going with that is also, if you don't mind sharing a little of that cultural background that you were talking about. You said you have Cherokee heritage. Is that something that you and your parents were always aware of, always close to? Has it been a fluctuating journey for you? Whatever you don't mind speaking on.
Sure. So my family has always kind of known we had Indigenous heritage, but we didn't get registered into the Cherokee Nation until I was maybe 16 years old, and that included my grandparents. So they, of course, grew up around it. My grandparents lived in Muskogee, which is just a town over from Tahlequah. So they grew up connected to the Cherokee Nation and some of the traditions and roots, but my family didn't. As far as my parents and us living here in Arkansas, it's very different. So I grew up quite removed from the nation and the reservations and the communities. And I think when I went to Northeastern State University for my first 2 years of college, that was where I really kind of tapped into it. And I just realized, oh my gosh, this place is so special. And it's not the government there. It's not any of the attractions, the famous sites. It's the people. And of course, it being the heart of the Cherokee Nation, that was very strong for me. I went to my first powwow there, and have gotten to see it grow and continue to expand, especially the Cherokee Nation, of course. And so I wanted to bring that with me. When I was at JBU, I didn't see anyone that kind of shared that Indigenous background. I think at the time when I was there were only 3 or 4 students that had Indigenous heritage. And I could be wrong about those numbers, but as far as I can remember. And so I was going from this, position of being completely immersed and surrounded by my heritage, my culture, my ancestors, to going back to my hometown where I didn't see that represented or even talked about or celebrated. So that kind of is why, I came to the museum, is just, again, that Indigenous hospitality. I needed that. Other people need it. And just kind of really anchoring in on that was so important to me. I'm very lucky that I was able to find the history of my ancestors. I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be alive today if my ancestors didn't walk the Trail of Tears and didn't survive it. So that's something I carry with me very proudly.
And you became part of furthering that story of as you said, a lot of traditions and oral histories and ceremonies, the ways that they're passed down. You're kind of taking that and amplifying it with the organization that you work with. So then you became part of really like being a steward of that history as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think steward is a great word because it can apply to anyone. Anyone can be a part of this, which is what we try to share at MONAH. It's one of these great opportunities we have to kind of extend the voices of our ancestors for those of us who are Indigenous. We do have quite a few Indigenous employees at the workplace at MONAH who continue to do the same thing that I am. Our shop manager, she's Dene. And then we also have our archivist who's Ojibwe. And so we are proud to, be a multicultural environment. And it's important for it to be if we're representing so many various tribes and cultures, of course.
Yeah, that's also reflected in the actual staff and the people that are taking care of the important storytelling and of these artifacts. So that's really neat that it's not just the displays that are showcasing different groups, different time periods, but also the people that are helping put that out to the public as well.
Yes, of course.
Do you mind if we talk a little about language? You have used the word Indigenous quite a bit during this conversation. And honestly, being a journalist, being a writer, correct wording, correct language, correct usage is something that's very important to me to make sure, especially with my relationships with my sources. I want everyone that I work with to feel like I am saying exactly the right thing and they didn't have to educate me on it. So I guess I had reached a point where I maybe thought it's more correct for me, a journalist, to use the word Indigenous more often in my writing or in my conversations than Native American. But the name of the museum is Native American. So can you talk about, are those words interchangeable? Is one more correct than the other? Is it offensive at this point for someone who's not of a certain heritage to use one or either? Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I definitely can. We get that question a lot in the museum. And we also have people saying things that they probably don't know is derogatory. So part of that is interpretation. But even more so, I think it depends on the person you're speaking with. Kind of asking them, the Indigenous person or Native American person, I consider those to be interchangeable and appropriate to say. Those ones are usually, if you're talking to someone who you believe to be Indigenous or Native American, they'll not bat an eye at it. At our museum, we say multiple different ways of that: Native, Native American, even Latinx communities are represented in the museum. So we're aware of what the appropriate terms are. And we're also working on doing that in the museum on all of our plaques, is updating and, making sure we're being respectful. But yeah, I would say those two are interchangeable. And of course, our museum's named Native American History. But Indigenous is one I reach for mostly because I feel like it covers a broader scale. Because, of course, I mentioned we cover North America, but we also cover South and Central. And, even on top of that, if we have any visitors that are from the islands of Hawaii, that is something that I like to make sure they're included on because they're Indigenous and they're a part of the U.S., regardless of their status in the government. But, it also includes people that are from different countries that have Indigenous heritage as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. No, I agree with Jocelyn. It's always nice to, further that education, further make sure that we're respecting other cultures, people that are not just like you and me, right? So as far as back to the museum itself, if somebody, one of our listeners today, wanted to visit the museum, is there any piece of advice that you would have for them or anything that you would want them to make sure that they check out or that they get to look at?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, one of the things that I didn't mention is we have a giant woolly mammoth skeleton when you walk in the front door. He's very big, and we call him our mascot, Tusker. But he's completely real, and so you're going to kind of enter with a boom.
A wow factor.
A wow factor.
Yeah.
So continuing into that, I would say pick up our audio wands. They share our history for each artifact. So there's numbers on them. You just punch the number, and you can go at whatever pace you would like, which is nice. It's a little bit untraditional to what a lot of museums currently do. But it also shares more than what we have written on our plaques. So you're getting a further education about each artifact. I love that. And then, of course, our gift shop. Our collection is great, and so is our gift shop. There's just so much to be said about each culture. And, we proudly represent multiple people. And, if you have the chance to talk to any of our staff, we're very educated about this. And if we're not, we're happy to look it up and figure out the answers for you. Yeah.
We mentioned November being National Native American Heritage Month. And, you've talked about a lot of the tribes and nations represented in MONAH's collection, in MONAH staff as well. And MONAH celebrates, honors many of the tribes and nations that either used to or currently reside in and around Arkansas. So during National Native American Heritage Month, is there anything else that you can tell us about how museums like MONAH or museums like MONAH are honoring these people?
Yeah, for sure. So MONAH is going to have the Cherokee Nation be hosted at our museum for registry IDs for the Cherokee people. We're one of the many locations that will be hosting them for this month. So people that need to update their ID, people who, need to be registered can do so. That is one of the ways that we are honoring and celebrating the communities in the area, as well as just Native Americans in general. Of course, we have our story time coming up. It's, of course, the Wampanoag story of Thanksgiving, but it's also one of the original stories. So kind of giving a more Indigenous perspective of what Thanksgiving actually looked like. I'm sure there's, tribe to tribe, there's differences,
Right.
but of course there are also similarities.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that is one of the things that we're doing. And then we also have a newer resource. So we have outreach boxes that you can loan out and either teach your family, teach a classroom. And these items in the box will be either items replicated from what Indigenous people used, what they currently use, like, for example, corn. We have some corn stock in there. We have some dried corn. So kind of expanding upon, this is something they used back then. They had agriculture, and that agriculture continues into our diets today. Corn, for example, is Indigenous made. So, the name for it is, gosh, I can't think of the name, but, it was cross-blended by a tribe from Mexico, New Mexico, and they created this corn with grass and wheat. So if they didn't figure out how to cross-blend those, like, there's science involved, we wouldn't have corn today. And so now, our corn's much bigger, of course, did all sorts of different ways that people grow it now, but you can still find the wild corn that they created.
Yeah, that's really neat. So on top of showcasing beautiful art, it sounds like this month specifically and ongoing, you guys are supporting Cherokee Nation. You're also providing educational opportunities for families, for schools outside of the museum, and then also telling the Thanksgiving story from the Indigenous perspective. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us today that you wish people would know about maybe Native American culture or the museum itself?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm working on a project for, and it's going to be an ongoing project, but a lot of people don't know we are a certified site for the Trail of Tears. So there's a disbandment of Cherokee people that passed through Northwest Arkansas, and we're right at the end of the trail, into Oklahoma, of course. But, visiting our museum, we have murals outside that talk about some of the well-known Native American artists, like Maria Tallchief. She was a famous ballerina dancer and one of the first. And we've got, a mural done by artist Johnny Diacon, which kind of represents not only the Trail of Tears, but like the hardships of Indigenous history. And it's a beautiful winter scene of Indigenous people passing through the woods. And so while it's not completely dedicated to the Trail of Tears, it represents it because that's what happened. And so kind of knowing this and bringing awareness to Northwest Arkansas, just that, hey, we're a part of this history. The history is here. And you see that not just from the land, you see it in the people, in the communities. For me, example, with my Cherokee heritage, but, kind of recognizing, the tribes that once were here, their ancestral land, it's still sacred. And so kind of finding a way to honor and celebrate that is really important. If you want to get involved with MONAH, you can volunteer with us, or you can be an intern. If you need an internship for college, we do have a curatorial internship and a business internship. The curatorial, of course, is going to be working more behind the scenes with me and our archivist. So working on file upkeep, working on items that need to be documented, any new items that we bring into the museum, items that we're letting go of, or that were loaned out to us but are being returned to the original owner, things like that. And then the business internship focuses more on the shop and customer experience, and of course, the museum experience.
Yeah.
Where can people keep up with event information, new things, information about those internships? Where can they find you guys? Where can they keep up with you?
They can keep up with us on our Facebook and our social media, and of course our website too. And just dropping by the museum. That's a great way to just figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think lastly, I will say we also have Museum Store Sunday coming up. That is our 1 year date on Sunday, the only day we're open. Kind of like our Black Friday, but we have discounts in the gift shop. Of course, any consignment items that, Indigenous people make, those will not be discounted because we want them to get their full percentage. And it's important that we honor that. But it's a great way to get involved and support your Indigenous communities, support the artists, and even, figure out what is being made, how it's being made, who these people behind the art is.
Yeah.
I love that.
Me too.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. Thank you so much, Caitie, for sharing some of your story with us, sharing some of the museum's work with us. It was a conversation I was really looking forward to having, and really looking forward to, as Alexa said, what we do is celebrate what's going on in Arkansas. And this is an organization that, like I said, I've known about in Bentonville and Northwest Arkansas for a while, but still didn't know that much. So definitely excited to share your story, especially during National Native American Heritage Month. So thank you for being here, Caitie.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Caitie.